Stephen Howson, Full-Time Devils, delighted to be joined by Mr. Tony Park, Manchester United youth author and historian. 6 months ago we caught up with Tony. We've got him back in to discuss what's happened, and a lot has happened. This happened, and also last time we spoke, Paul McGuinness had just been relieved of his duties, shall we say, as the Manchester United under-18s boss, and we've only just appointed somebody this week. So, Tony, let's talk about what has happened.
It's certainly been a roller coaster for some players, but also for the fans. I think when we spoke last time, we were talking about some players about whether they would get a chance or not, and then within no time at all, James Weir, Joe Riley, Cameron Borthwick-Jackson, Marcus Rashford, the list goes on and on. All of a sudden, Louis van Gaal had pushed them into the first team, and I have to be honest, I don't think any one of them let us down.
Nope.
Some of them had bigger roles to play than others. Some of them were more cameo in nature, but every single one of them showed that giving youth a chance and giving the lads an opportunity to play with first team players was never going to let the club down.
The back end of the season, the introduction of fosu-mensah and Rashford in particular, was the shining light at the end of, by the FA Cup win, quite a dismal season really, wasn't it? The emergence of Rashford, I don't know if you're of the same opinion of me, Rashford didn't look that special in the academy. He was lacking a little bit of composure, getting in great positions. His pace obviously was evident for anyone to see, as was his determination and the attitude that he displays. But he didn't look to be the player that he's gone on to be. Getting not only just England caps, but goals in the international team, full international.
It's weird actually, because we were talking outside Old Trafford a few months ago, and we were talking more about Mensah than we were about Rashford, if you remember. And both of us were saying it's a done deal. This kid is going to play for the United first team. It's just he's a monster, he's a beast. Whether he's playing centre half, whether he's playing in central midfield, he is going to be a star of the future, because he looked the part in under-18s, and he looked the part when he played in the under-21s. We didn't see that same style or that same oomph with Rashford. There were times when he was on his game and he scored a couple of good goals. There were times when, as you quite rightly said, you never question his commitment. You'll never question his skill, his talent, his work rate. But he just didn't seem to have something. But I tell you what, the minute he got that opportunity, he seems to have grown in stature, grown in confidence. And I'm looking at him, and it's almost like he belongs in that first team, and he feels he belongs in that first team.
He definitely grabbed it with both hands, and that was what was great to see. And Marcus Rashford skipped the under-21s. He basically went from the 18s. I think he had 2 appearances in the 21s.
That's right.
And then went straight into the first team. And this is what I want to talk to you about at the moment, because the competitiveness, for me, the now under-23 league, has been rebranded as an under-23 league. Richard Scudamore come out and said that the average age that a Premier League player makes their debut from an academy is age 23. So that should raise the age groups from 21 to 23. It makes sense. It kind of does make sense. But, again, it's a beige league, isn't it? Where's the grit coming from in this?
It's really frustrating for 3 reasons. Reason number 1, they may be at average of 23 at other clubs. They're not at our club. We've always blooded youngsters a lot earlier than 23. Mm-hmm. So if you look back at our history, they've all got chances as teenagers, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds. 23 is late for us. I mean, Jesse Lingard was a 23-year-old, but that was because of his size, so that's an outlier. Most of the kids through our academy have got in there much earlier. So as a consequence, I would like to see a much more competitive league for the top clubs. The Barcelonas, the Bayern Munichs of the world, they're not keeping their kids back to 23 before they push them through. Maybe Stoke are, maybe Watford are, I don't know. I haven't done the stats on them. So I'm really sort of confused by Scudamore. But what's more confusing is I think the league has changed its process and its format something like 12 times in 16 years. And I work in business, and when a leader is changing the plot 12 times in 16
Evidence
years,
it doesn't work.
There's something telling you that he's not happy with the way it worked the first time, so let's change it. Well, I'm not happy with that, let's change it. Well, I'm not happy with that, let's change it. And I'm just thinking, what's he doing? Because it doesn't seem to be changing anything at all, apart from rebranding. It's still the same kids playing against the same kids. And I look at someone like Axel Tuanzebe, and perhaps we'll talk more about him, but he's dying for an experienced centre-half to be sitting next to him. He's not ready for the first team with the likes of
He's
Blind.
also ready for the test of an experienced centre-forward.
Totally agree. So why don't we get someone like a Jones or a Rocco playing in the 23s, or whatever you want to call it, reserve under 20, I'm not really bothered what you call it, playing next to him, talking to him, educating him. And then for the opposition, let's put one of those hard, gritty-nosed centre forwards who's trying to build his way back into his first team, and let's see what a battle looks like, because that's what Axel's going to have to deal with when he makes his Premier League debut.
And that's the difference. You go from playing under 21s, under 23s, or even just straight under 18s, and then you're expected to deal with seasoned, hardened, veteran centre forwards. Now, something that I thought was a great idea when it was pitched this summer was the EFL trophy, the rebranded Johnson's Paint trophy. And they wanted academy sides to come and enter into that. And for me, that was, yes, this is exactly it. Now, obviously he's retired, but can you imagine Tuanzebe coming up against a Dean Windass in this sort of environment? Who's going to put pressure on him? Who's going to tell him he's slept with his mother? He's going to pinch him. He's going to poke him. He's going to stand on his toes. He's going to do everything to put him off his game. That's the thing that they need to experience. And Manchester United, as well as Manchester City and a couple of other big clubs, have rejected the option to go in there. What do you think about that?
I'm kind of torn. I'm a traditionalist at heart, so I can actually feel for those league clubs who are saying, this is our chance of getting to Wembley. This is our chance of fulfilling our dreams. And now the big boys are coming in with their reserve teams. And so as a consequence, I get their perspective, and I have some sympathy towards that. Being selfish, I totally agree. I think there's a great opportunity. One of the things that is incredibly frustrating with the Manchester United club communication process is they never communicate why they do or don't do what they do or don't do. So, for example, there's a Premier League 2, I think it's called Premier League 2, under 23 league, whatever the thing is called. There's a League Cup. We've not entered that League Cup for the last 3 seasons. Why not? And yet there's not enough games for these players, and we're not entering the League Cup system. I don't understand that. And when this season there's no friendlies. We played Port Vale as a pre-season friendly, and they beat us 4-2. I think some of our lads learnt more from that 4-2 defeat playing against pros who were pushing them off the ball, who were strong in their structure and their discipline. They're pros. They play for their wage.
And that was a team that we would likely to be facing, and that's evidence that we're not just going to turn up and bully these teams with our reserves. It's going to be competitive football, and we know United take numbers, and United might be an outlier in that sense, but I think if you had a United under-23 side representing Manchester United, because that's what it says on the badge. It doesn't say under-23s, it just says Manchester United. I'd be there, you'd be there. We know hundreds of others that would go, and I think United away, under-23s in the EFL Cup would be an absolutely class away, and I think they would get a lot of support from our lot, I think.
I still think the Premier League 2 under-23 league is flawed in still 2 major reasons. It's clearly not competitive enough. Particularly for our players. Maybe it's competitive enough for Ipswich and Colchester and whoever else, but we're not those clubs. And it's certainly not enough league games. I mean, we're 3-4 games into the season, and we've got players who haven't had a kick of the ball yet. We've got players in the whole of last year had a handful of appearances. I mean, how do you develop when you play 6 games? I looked at the fixture list, it's like 2 games a month. 2 games a month. That's like going to work 2 days a month.
And some are going to get called off as well.
Some are going to get called off. Some people have got injuries. People are going to be coming back. I mean, I feel sorry for some of those kids, the Charlie Scotts of the world. He's in this incredible limbo zone. He can't play for the 18s, but he's in the young age group for the under-23s. There are 6 years difference between 5 years difference between being an under-18 and being an under-23. There are so many people ahead of him, even with the loans. We haven't loaned out any centre halves. We've not loaned out any real fullbacks. Weir was a Wilson, Yanazai, Pereira, they're all front players. So he's still not going to get any time on the football pitch unless there's injuries. How does that kid develop? And people say, well, he'll get his chance if he's good enough. I don't believe that. There's too many people in the game who've proved that wrong. You can't see a superstar at 17 years old.
No, and I think games is the ultimate thing. I say this a lot, and I'm not sure where I got the figure from, or if I just completely made it up. I think you need 100 matches at first team level between 18 and 23 to be considered a professional footballer. I think that's your apprenticeship, is that 100 matches.
I usually say 2 seasons. If you say to me, I've played solidly for 2 seasons, I think you're a regular. So if you've got 38 games a season, let's call it 75.
Plus cups, you're not far off.
So you're not far off the 100 you're talking about. And I've always looked, when I keep records of our youth players and keep records of our team, I think, I've played solid. Jesse Lingard, he played a full season last season after being injured before. He's on the verge of becoming a regular first team player. If he does that again this season, no one can argue that he's a first team player.
Of course.
2 solid seasons.
Let's talk about the leagues themselves then, because last season we won again the under-21 league, despite I don't know how, a lot of the time. Again, not having a forward, and this is something I want to get into actually, because I look at our under-23 side at the moment, and Pereira's gone, Weir's now gone, and I agree with those moves. Will Keener's gone, I agree with that and wish him luck. But where is the team going to come from? Because I don't think if you're a footballer, if you're a central midfielder now at the moment and you're 19, 20 years old at Manchester United, that Manchester United team needs to be playing well and competitive in the top half of the table. If you're just losing every week, how do you develop? I think you can only develop in a competitive team. I'm not saying let's turn up and smash everyone 5-0, because I don't think you learn then either. But you certainly don't learn if you're losing every week. And I look at this team at the moment and I see no balance. I see no number 9. I see no wingers. I see 25 attacking central midfielders, and I see that as a problem. What's going to happen with our under-23s, do you think, this season? Because our next match is Manchester City.
Yeah, I think if you look at the history of football, it goes in cycles. And I think if you'll remember some years ago in the England team, we had a glut of forwards. And then as a consequence, the likes of Andy Cole, who had a terrific scoring record.
Yeah, Robbie Fowler.
Couldn't get in the team because we had a glut of them. And then all of a sudden that dries up. And so you get this natural cycle that comes through the game. The problem we've had with our with coming through under 23s is the majority of those players, probably 80% of those players, have come through the academy. So what if you don't have an under 16-year-old and an under 15-year-old and an under 14-year-old who are scoring goals for fun, then they're not coming through the system. I don't see it. We have done it just recently. We've readdressed it, but 4 or 5 years ago we weren't readdressing it. I'm watching the 16-year-olds and saying, we've got any strikers. And I'm thinking 2 or 3 years down the track saying, if they're not got strikers in the 16s, where are they coming from the 18s, and where are they going to come from for the 23s? Now, we were unlucky with Wilson because he was perennially injured, so that was unfortunate in that period. But we were incredibly fortunate that we were able to take Marcus Rashford, who was a winger in the 16s in his early 18s career, developing into a centre forward. That was one of Paul McGuinness's master strokes, was to do that as he would physically mature as well. But again, there was no one coming through behind him. And there's still no one coming through. So as a consequence, you've got this lack of scouting, this lack of coaching at that critical junior level between 14 and 16. And as a consequence, it's no surprise when Paul McGuinness says, well, how do you expect me to win games when the system isn't bringing through the talent that's necessary?
One of his complaints prior to losing his job was that it wasn't just enough materials.
There
wasn't enough raw materials. Now, Nicky, put on the screen behind us there, he has recently addressed the fact that we need recruitment, and he's brought in around 40 scouts, additional 40
unbelievable.
Scouts.
And you've been seeing on Twitter, you've been seeing on some of the forums, we've got a new guy in Holland, we've got a new guy in Brazil, we've got a new guy in Portugal, there's a new guy in Ireland. Absolutely, and that's been overdue, long overdue. So, tick a box, it's being addressed. We won't see the benefit of that for a couple of years now. However, what I have seen, I followed the Otten Cup very closely. We've seen the Chongs, the Burkharts, the Leo Connors coming into the team now, and they look really good.
We've just signed 2 forwards, which is something I was going to bring on to. We've signed several players, but 2 centre forwards. One's Bowie, and the other is Burkhart. Now that for me, there's competition for the 18s.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the 18s then. How are they going to do this season? Dismal last season, awful season, rock bottom of the table for the majority of the season. A couple of standout performances. Obviously, we had Tuanzebe, Roshan, Rashford all come through. Angel Gomez got a couple of cameos towards the end of the season. He started this season like a rocket. And we are seeing slowly now O'Connor, as you mentioned. That was a player that we spoke about actually.
Absolutely.
Back in January, February. He's now joined the team. Chong has joined the team. Burkhart, Bowie. These are all lads that are in the team. Are we expecting a good season, do you think, this season? And we've got a new manager. Which
is even great news. So I think last season was a real struggle. I mean, it was the worst season in our under-18 history. We've been running under-18 football for nearly 80 years, and it was the worst season. We had 12 losses in a row, unheard of. And Paul McGuinness carried that can. I think unfairly, but he carried that can. And it was to do with the material he had. Now, that was a consequence of a couple of things. We had a few injuries. We didn't have the talent. Louis van Gaal was pulling people into the first team.
Yeah, not just the 21s, it was the first team. He was getting dripped.
So for the good of the individuals, that helped. For the good of the 18s, it didn't help so much. So we've got some balance in the team now. As you quite rightly say, we've got Bahoui from Brentford. I watched him. I was actually over in Northern Ireland watching the Milk Cup a couple of years ago. And he was bouncing. He was playing on the wing. He was playing centre forward, scoring goals for fun. He looked absolutely on fire. And I thought, wow, that's a player. And Dave Bushell was over there at the time looking at the same game. Obviously, in hindsight, he saw something, and an offer's been made, and Bohu's joined the club. So it'd be really interesting to see how he develops. He's very slight, he's very young. I still think he's got some growing to do, some maturing to do, so it'd be interesting to see how he performs.
He's quite tall, though.
Very tall. Burkhart is something else. This guy, trust me, this guy will score for fun.
Clip it up.
This guy, the first time I saw him, I'm not a big YouTube watcher because you see what you see. So we got a cameo at Liverpool and we hadn't played well in the first half, and he comes on and straight away he changed the whole game. People say someone else came on, Gomez, it wasn't. Burkhart changed the game.
Gomez moved back from 10 to 8, which I thought was a big thing.
What happened was Burkhart started playing on the shoulder of the last defender. And then he kept switching from one centre-half to the other centre-half. So both centre-halves now were saying, I can't push forward because I don't know what this kid's going to do. And it was so clever for a young kid to do that. And he played just on the shoulder, and then he made his first run, and I've never seen pace like it. He scared them shitless. All of a sudden, they dropped back 10 yards. And then Gomez has suddenly got 10 yards more space to work in, and he can work his magic. But that was all to do with Burkhart. Now, he played his first full game last weekend. We went down to... last weekend, we went down and saw that game. Unbelievable. And Burkhart was just, at Everton, he was just amazing. He was on the wing, he set up one of the goals, he played centre forward, he scored after a tap in from good work from Boonen. I think this kid's going to be such a great outlet to allow those other players to play. You have Durnley on the right, you've got Gribben coming back in the team, you've got Gomez, don't forget Adi Barlow. Yep. Adi Barlow's one to watch for this season.
Adi Barlow is one to watch. He's got the same sort of internal energy and engine and tempo and drive that we saw in Rashford, where his ability might only take him to so far, but the same way Riley, they're just dogged determination elevates them into something,
he's a good player.
Something different. And well, we saw the goal. He had a highlight reel goal last season, and I'm sure he's going to have more this season. With what Burkhart's been doing in the under-18s, that's the exact thing that I don't see us having in the under-23s. There's no one to do that. We've got 100 number 10s, but no one who's got that number 9.
No, and I don't think it's just the 9, Stephen. I think it's fullbacks as well. The issues we've got the 18s is fullback. So we'll wait and see what happens when a few injuries get resolved. How Kieran McKenna's going to play that. It's going to be very interesting to see how he lines up, what formation he's going to play, what his approach is going to be. There was an article in the Manchester Evening News this morning, stroke last night. Stuart Matheson said, we're going to bring back the class of 92. Nicky Butt has said, we want to start not bringing through 1s and 2s for the first team. We want to bring through 4s and 5s for the first team. We want to bring back the calibre of the Giggs and the Scholes. And that's what we should be doing. We shouldn't, by all means, let's bring through championship players, no argument. But we need to bring through the top quality, the Scholes, the Charltons, the bests.
Ultimately, that's the job of the Manchester United Academy.
Absolutely.
It's a wonderful thing that so many players have their grounding at Manchester United, then go on and have full careers elsewhere.
Absolutely.
But the job of the Manchester United Academy is to supply players to Manchester United, and the ones that are at the top of the game, international footballers, players that play part in winning trophies, like Nicky Butt done in 1999.
Absolutely.
That is the only thing that Manchester United should be doing.
So it's going to be really interesting because, some people say that the academy is mainly about development, and I think up to 16 we've had this conversation. I think that's true. But just like with any form of business, the minute you get to that 17-year-old stage, you sign your first professional contract, you now have an obligation. I think that's when results start to matter. And I'm going to be very interested to see if McKenna, like McGuinness before him, said, it is about development, but not development on its own, development with results.
McKenna's
because results is... Go ahead.
Sorry for interrupting, but McKenna, when they lost to Chelsea in the under-18s Cup last season, Tottenham, he was the Tottenham boss, he'd come out and said, I'm not bothered that we lost. It would have been nice to get to a cup final, but my job is to supply players for Mauricio Pochettino. That's his job. So it will be interesting.
It's going to be very interesting because what Warren Joyce said, and you saw him blow up the other day in a way I've never seen him before, he wants results as well as development too. And I don't think you can switch it on and switch it off. I think that mindset comes from when you start to turn into an adult. And I think when you play football, that adulthood is when you sign your first pro contract. That's 17 years old. That's not 21 or 22 or 23, regardless of what Scudamore says. So going back to the 18s and the 23s, be very interesting to see what McKenna does. Be very interesting to see what his relationship with Warren Joyce is going to be, because as he's rightly said, Warren Joyce is now going to inherit a team that's lost 2 centre forwards in Keane and Wilson, and in addition he's lost his major goal scorer outside those two from last season in Andreas Pereira, who not only was a great pivot but also was the third highest goal scorer. He's lost him as well. Where are the goals going to come from?
Where are the goals come from is the question, I think, for the Manchester United Academy. Do you think there's any chance that we might see Burkhardt, probably not because of the age of him, but maybe Bowie because he's a little bit older, I think he's a year older, dragged into the under-23s to supply those goals? We've seen 17-year-olds with Roshan Williams last season in the under-21s.
Do you know what? We don't know. We can only second guess. If following youth football for 30 or 40 years like I've had, one thing I do know is, you can never guess anything. There's always going to be a surprise around the corner. Who you think is going to make it doesn't make it, and someone who you think hasn't got a chance ends up having 600 games. So it's I've been very careful about saying who will and who won't. What I do see is I see at the moment a huge gap between the 18s and the 23s. Burkhardt's had 1.5 games. Bahoui, half a game. To then suddenly say they're ready for the 23s, I don't see it. I don't think they're physically ready. I don't think their mindset as a Manchester United player is ready. Let's get to Christmas and reassess that, maybe. I think with Roshan, he'd been at the club a long time. I think with Roshan, he's a physically different specimen, as Tuanzebe was as well. Terrell Warren may be in a position to step up. He's come back from the summer, and it's really interesting, Stephen, when you have those 3 months off from May to July and you don't see the kids, and then you come back and you go, who's that? And you don't realise it's the same player you saw 3 months ago. They've just filled out. Terrell Warren has filled out. He's become a little bit of a stronger, taller, more physical specimen. I expect to see him step up. I'd expect Cal Gribben. Cal Gribben is probably one of the most talented footballers we've got in the academy. He's currently out with a hamstring. People have often questioned his defensive game. I think he's able to do that. I think he's got the talent to be able to manage that. Whether he does or doesn't is down to Cal.
He's got a big season ahead of him.
I think he's got a massive season ahead of him, and I think he will step up to the 23s. I think he could step into that Andreas Pereira role, and I think he's got the capability to score goals.
Very similar footballer.
Very similar. He scored an absolute screaming goal in the Otten Cup where he beat half the defence and slotted it away in the back of the net. He can score from free kicks. I think he's got incredible balance. He can be a fantastic team player. It wouldn't surprise me at all as if he's the dark horse. We talked about him 2 years ago. He went off on and off last season. If he stays fit, I think he can really challenge to be a real serious player in Warren Joyce's team this year.
I thought he had a poor season last season, and I've ripped on him maybe a little bit too hard at times over the last season. I think he's certainly got the ability to change my opinion on him, and I think Warren Joyce as well. I think we underrate how good Warren Joyce is at getting. We saw what he did with Pereira. Pereira was in a very similar way, thought that he'd done it all already, got to Warren Joyce. Time to get the shovel out, mate, because you know you're going to go
Absolutely.
to work. And I think Callum Gribben is exactly the same. Right, I think that will do for this video. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Get your questions in for myself and for Tony, and we'll do our best to try and answer those through Twitter or maybe in the next video. So thank you for Tony for joining us. Thank you for you guys for checking us out. And make sure to check out the youth profiles, which will be coming after this as well, because we've got some very special players to talk about. See you later.
All right, guys, and welcome to what will be a very exciting debate about what Manchester United do with the number 10 position, or if in fact they need that position at all.